Good morning.
Rabbi, you did a really good job on the premiere last night.
I heard that I just said I was there once. What did I say? I don't even know.
Just how you helped a little bit to guide Beryl with his while he was, in the process.
Right. Uh-huh. Okay. Good. Very nice. I heard it was nice.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Baruch Hashem. That's great. Looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
All righty. Excuse me. Reminder, we're going to do Shabbos class and today's class today, as we do Sundays. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We welcome Tamara. Shalom to you. Welcome. Who else do we have here? Andrew in New Jersey. Good morning. Michael, good afternoon to you in Germany. Beverly, welcome. And Rav, shalom. Erica is in Norway with us. Good afternoon. Nitin in Canada. Who else? Eugenia in Calgary. Good morning. Tim in Texas. Boker Tov. Darren in the Philippines, where it's evening, where Hanukkah is already begun. Samita, hello. Ray, thank you for joining. Michael in Virginia is with us. Davida and Liba in New York. Good morning. Keith, welcome aboard in Brooklyn, New York. All right. Susanna in Miami is with us. Ray is in Malta. Okay. Sally in Texas, good morning. David, welcome. Leah in Fort Myers, Florida, good morning. Heather in Norwood, Connecticut, welcome. Zar is with us in Malaysia. Judith in Budapest. Judith, very nice. Diane in Arizona for the winter. Richard, welcome. Elizabeth in Illinois. Jean in Pennsylvania. And Beverly is in Florida. We have with us Batya and David, Adam, Tim, Michelle, Eliana. We have also on Instagram. Can't make out all the names. Louise, Sands, Sen. So, Aleichem Shalom to I can't make the name. Elvis Memories. All right. Akoy in Peru. David. And some others I can't make out exactly, but hey, welcome. We conclude the compiler's foreword. A brief conclusion. If you recall, the Alter Rebbe said in his foreword that I've met you all. And because I know your inner struggles, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say this, but those things don't really change. The situation might be a little different, but what we struggle on the inside ultimately remains the same. So I know you well, which is true. He does. And as a result, I have written all of the answers to all of the questions are in this book. And therefore you can always go back to it. You might forget something, you can always go back to it. And find tranquility for the soul. Furthermore, if a person doesn't find it themselves, the answer, well, you need to go to a mentor, you need to go to a teacher of Tanya, and they will be able to help you to find the answers. The answers are particular for you in your struggle. So he concludes and said that these, what he calls contrasting pamphlets that were distributed, and before it was printed, so they were made by copies, and many people, who were against the teachings of the Tanya, with time, the test of time, it stood. But because people copied them incorrectly, purposefully, in order to give a faulty meaning to his teachings, so there were people that nobly took up the effort to print these as books, and therefore he says that, first of all, he congratulates him and thanks him, but anybody who will print these books for 5 years after they have printed them, from when they finish printing, who print is actually gets a curse. As the Torah says, that cursed be the one who encroaches on their fellow's border, because you're encroaching on someone else's border. So it's actually, a law in Torah, and strict prohibition that against anybody publishing these books for 5 years. May be pleasant those who comply, and blessed with the good. These are the words of the compiler, the aforementioned Likutei Amarnim. Again, the Alter Rebbe is just lending his, his words to something that it was important in order to make certain that, not only they should recover, which is something that was mentioned previously, their expense, but moreover, that the teachings should not be abducted, so to speak, by those who want to falsify the teachings by copying it incorrectly. Because till that point it was in booklets that was hand copied, and now it was for the first time being printed. And that's the end of the compilers. We begin chapter 1. Chapter 1, in one word, neshamas, the plural for souls. That's where we're going with this chapter, is to bring out the idea of two souls, as we will see. Of course, we won't get there today. Today we're going to deal mainly with questions. So let us get right into it. Tanya b'soy perek gimel denida. We have learned in the end of the 3rd chapter of Nida, Mashvim Eisei, Tiyeh Tzadik V'al Tiyeh Rasha. A person takes an oath before they come into this world. They're administered an oath. What is the oath? Be righteous and be not wicked. And even if the whole world is telling you that you are righteous, tzadikata, you should be in your own esteem, in your own self-regard, as a rasha, wicked. So the word to take an oath, mashbin, it comes from the same word seven and the same word satiated. Seven is a complete cycle. Satiated is complete, of course. And an oath is to complete the individual that's under oath. So this is the idea. The soul, before it comes out into this world, it's satiated, it's completed, it's given an oath, and given thereby the strength to be righteous, right, and not to be wicked. Yet at the same time, if the whole world is telling you that you are righteous, you should regard yourself as wicked. See, Alter Rebbe says this needs explanation. Because in the Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avos, in chapter 2, it says, that you should not be wicked in your own estimation. So why should you? It's a contradiction. It's a contradiction, one Mishnah to the other. One says, be wicked in your own estimation if people are calling you righteous. And another one is saying that you should not be wicked in your own estimation. So that itself we need to be elucidated, which it will be later in chapter 13, also chapters 14, 29, and 34. We'll deal with this. Furthermore, says the Alter Rebbe, that was a contradiction in Torah teachings. But even from a logical perspective, if a person is going to consider themselves wicked, what's going to happen? You're going to grieve. You're going to be depressed, which means you're going to be able to serve God with joy. And that's a fundamental principle, that we need to serve God with joy and with a content heart. So how could you look at yourself in a wicked manner? Further, on the other hand, if you're not going to kind of grieve at all at your self-appraisal, well, then you're going to be irreverent before God. Like, okay, so I did wrong. I did, so I did something wrong in the eyes of God, right? For another person, said something not nice, whatever. So if you're not going to grieve at all from it, in other words, there's no self-appraisal, so then like, hey, that's not good either. So the whole thing doesn't jive. That's the first question, or questions, right? How do you look at yourself? However, the above matter is going to be more clearly understood, not today, but in forthcoming classes. We're just setting the what's the word? We're setting the stage, so to speak. The Talmud says that there are 5 types of people. A righteous person who prospers, materially as well as spiritually. A righteous person who suffers, both materially and spiritually. A wicked person who has some good in them and who prospers. And a wicked person who suffers both spiritually and materially. And then you'll have the Beinani, the intermediate person, which is the name of this book, Sefer Shel Beinani, right? But of course, you can only know what is the Beinani in context of the other 2, as we will see later on. And later on in chapter 10, we're going to go into at length to understand what is a righteous person. And chapter 11, what is a rasha, a wicked person. And then chapter 12 will be the Beinani, the intermediate individual. We'll go at length to understand. Well, we'll begin then, at least. So the Talmud actually explains this. What these 5 types are. What does it mean, someone who prospers? So the prospering, spiritually and material, for the righteous is an indication or a sign of what's going on inside of them. In other words, they're completely righteous. as opposed to an incomplete righteous individual who's imperfect, right? So it will be reflected on the outside with some sort of suffering, all right? And the Zohar explains that in other terms, but the same idea is the righteous who suffer. Well, it says the evil in them is subservient to their good nature. So it's subservient to their good, but it's not completely transformed because they're an incomplete tzaddik, not completely. As opposed to as a righteous person, it's completely transformed. So the Talmud further explains, and this is where we're going with all of this. More on this, of course, later, as I mentioned, chapters 10, 11, and 12. Right? This is a springboard for some questions and a springboard for our discussion of importance. So the Gemara, the Talmud in Brachas, says that the righteous are judged or motivated or ruled by their good nature, while the wicked are judged or rather motivated and ruled by their evil nature. Meaning their self-serving nature has the final say in them. Whereas the righteous, their godly part in them has the final say in them. Now this is the key over here where we're going. The Beinani, and again remember this is called the book of Sefer Shel Beinani, the book of the Beinani, the intermediate, and others intermediate between the righteous and the wicked. So the Talmud says that they are of a nature that they have both good and evil in them. Now the Talmud continues, and it says, Amar Rabbi, who was the greatest in his generation. Rabbi, he was the greatest, not just sage, but greatest individual. And he said, for example, me, I'm a Beinani. Abaya, his student, said to him, the Talmud continues, Master, you make it impossible for any creature to live. Because if you're merely a Beinani, that means the rest of us are less than you. And we're wicked. And as it says, which we'll learn more about later, in chapter 11, when we speak about what it means wickedness, right? We're using English terms here which may not be so appropriate because they conjure up an idea which is definitely not what we're going to learn. Very different. So the Rasha, as the sages say, that even when they're alive, they're dead. So you make it impossible for any of us to live because, like, we're the Walking Dead. This is the original Walking Dead, by the way. But, all right. So that's the Talmud. So now the Alter Rebbe takes that piece of Talmud. Again, see the we went through 5 different types. We're now focused on the Beinani. There were 2 righteous, 2 wicked, or Rasha. And now we're focused on the Beinani. So the Alter Rebbe says, clearly, this Beinani that we're talking about needs great explanation. But before that, let's ask another question. And that is Job, or Eov, as he's known in Hebrew. The Talmud says that he made a statement. Lord of the universe, you've created the righteous and you've created the wicked. The Alter Rebbe asks, though, what do you mean? God decrees a lot of things before you come into this world. Are you going to be tall? Are you going to be short? Are you going to be rich? Are you going to be poor? Are you going to be smart or not? Right? These are things that come from above. But righteous and wicked, that's moral prerogative. That's right from wrong. That's not predetermined. Of course, if it were, hey, there's no freedom of choice. All of Judaism would kind of be chucked out. So what does it mean? Obviously, we need a real good understanding of this. This will be answered in chapter 14 and 27. As I said, this is only a springboard. So that's another question. So we must also understand how the Alter Rebbe goes back to the Beinoni. But of course, when you understand what the righteous is and what the wicked, the tzaddik and the rasha, then this in-between person, we're going to understand the Beinoni. So getting back, what is the essential nature of this Beinoni? Certainly, Rabbi could not have erred to think he is merely a Beinoni, that he has half good and half bad in his life, right? Beinoni, which means intermediate in between, right? Righteous, all good. Wicked or rasha, mostly bad. And he's half and half the Beinoni. No. We know the Talmud tells us that Rabbi was such a devoted man of God that when the angel of death came to kill him, couldn't, because he never stopped doing mitzvahs. He never stopped studying. There was always some words of Torah on his lips that he was focused on. Words of prayer, words of kindness, acts of mitzvahs. The angel of death had no dominion over him. It's a whole different story, which we won't go into now, right? So obviously, we're not talking about a person here that could have made a mistake and thought that he was a half and half person. And you can't say humility, right? Oh, he's humble, and that's called false humility. You're not allowed to be falsely humble. Genuinely humble, yes, but that would be false. To think that, you are half of your day doing good and half of your day you're doing wrong, if that's not the case. Well, that definitely was not the case of Rabbi. He was a very holy man. So we need to understand. Furthermore, the whole idea of a Beinoni actually has a bit of a difficulty, the Alter Rebbe says. Why? Because if someone has sins and they didn't take care of it, they didn't own it, didn't deal with it, it's very much like a stain on your shirt, the stain on the shirt, right? The wine stain, the food stain. If you didn't clean it, it's still a stain. So if you didn't clean your soul from stains, then you'll have wickedness on your soul, right? And furthermore, if you owned your stuff, dealt with it, as the old saying goes, face your stuff rather than stuff your face, you dealt with it. But then you and you dealt with it and you made good on it, then you're considered a completely righteous person. So where's the middle ground? And when we're speaking about, middle ground, we're not talking about merely, like what's called a sin in Torah is not like, you did something horrific like Attila the Hun. No. Even if a minor prohibition, our rabbis, the sages in the Talmud consider that as something sinful, meaning you have a stain on your soul. Furthermore, even if someone could forewarn another person from doing wrong, you could have an influence on another human being, and you don't have a positive influence on them. You're also responsible for their negative actions, and therefore termed rasha as a result. So it's not about just your actions. You could just sit in the cave and be, wonderful, but it's even how you engage with other people. Now, we're not going to get off on the topic over here, but of course, if you can't influence that person, then that means that you could definitely influence that person and you don't influence them. Right? So that's what the Talmud is speaking about. But we're not going to get off on topic on that, right? Furthermore, says the Alter Rebbe, based on our sages, is someone who was able to learn Torah and wasted time. That's called a sin. I mean, the greatest gift that God has given us is time, and to use it out in a positive, good way. You have time, you waste it. You could have used it to study Torah. You're also considered responsible for that and guilty. Now, in that point, depending on who the person is and what kind of person, but we're talking about a more high-minded person who treasuring their time, treasuring their service of God, wasting their time. So wasting that time, actually, our sages say, is like despising the word of God. A very harsh statement the sages say in the Talmud, right? So we have to conclude over here that a Beinoni is not even guilty of the neglect of studying Torah, which Rabbi was not guilty of that. Every moment he was engaged in connection to God. Again, as we mentioned earlier, that the angel of death could not take him. The whole plan that was devised and whatever. Again, for another time. That's why Rabbi can make a mistake and call himself a Beinoni. Right? Because a Beinoni doesn't have any sins. Okay. So now we need to obviously understand if he doesn't have any sins, what differentiates him from the tzaddik, the righteous person. Can understand what differentiates the Beinoni from the wicked, from the rasha. But what does it differentiate from the tzaddik? Well, for that we're going to have to wait. We're on a journey. We're on a journey. The conclusion of today's class is a note that bringing down from the Zohar that says there that a righteous person who suffers is the idea that they suffer because they have a few sins, was the question of Rabbi Hamnuna to Eliyahu. Rabbi Hamnuna was asking Elijah the prophet. So he answered him, no, he doesn't have any sins. That's not what it means. So he explains to him it doesn't mean that. But then the question, of course, is how could he even have an original thought, an initial thought, that a righteous person has any sins? So the Alter Rebbe concludes that there are 70 faces to the Torah, and therefore you could perhaps look at it this manner, on some level at least.